This is one of Cluny the Scourge's Rome Total War online matches, and this time I'm playing as Spain. Now I've taken one unit of bull warriors, that's the toughest, most deadliest unit in my army, and that will harbour the general. I've taken 3 units of naked fanatics, and between those first 4 units I have the main striking component of my army. Now I also have 6 scutarii, that's regular infantry equipped with pillar and short swords, and they form my main battle line. And in the rear I have 5 units of long shield cavalry, medium horse, but the best that Spain has available to it if you don't include general's bodyguard units. So let's take a closer look at my naked fanatic warriors. What do you notice about them? Firstly, they most definitely are not naked, they're wearing loincloths. Secondly, they're screaming stinking rats at the enemy. So what would exactly move a man to claim that he is naked when he is not, and to shout preposterous things at people? I would say either that they are drunk, on drugs, mad, or, and this is I think far more likely in this particular instance, blisteringly stupid. Now my opponent, Jimro, is playing as the Seleucids, and he has taken 5 units of unupgraded cataphracts, and for the infantry component of his army, 7 units of silver shield pikemen. My opponent therefore has taken no missile units, neither have I. This is going to be done the old-fashioned way. Now on this map, Macedonian ruins, midway between my starting position and his, there is a little cluster of trees. Barbarian infantry gain a combat bonus when fighting in trees, while cavalry, such as the greatly feared super heavy cataphracts, will suffer a penalty there. It would therefore be highly advantageous if the fighting would go down in this very spot. My intention therefore is to position my troops here, and then try to goad my opponent into approaching. My scutarii have all had their pillar throwing capability set to fire at will. The moment that enemy troops come within range, they will be released, and that too will hopefully help to further provoke my opponent into striking just where I want him to. At first he's pretty patient. He remains stationary for quite some time, and I'm going to edit out much of that material. The maneuvers that I make to encourage my opponent to attack include flanking moves with my cavalry on the left, splitting my horsemen to create a weak target for him to use his cavalry against. Naturally I take care not to actually let him reach them. His position becomes somewhat dislocated as his infantry move to match his cavalry movements, but since he has taken no missile units, he has no means to force me to emerge from my cover and attack him, just as I have no means to force him to come at me. Therefore we engage in a psychological battle of wills. I shuffle my infantry a little further forward, presenting him with a target, making sure that my units aren't continually hidden in the trees, which they will be whenever I leave them completely stationary. I further create intentional weaknesses in my position by dividing my cavalry up even more, sending 2 units of long shields far over to the right here, leaving the left much more exposed and vulnerable. If he will just use his cataphracts to plunge at those cavalry, then perhaps I will be able to lure him into the woods. Now I inch another unit of cavalry steadily forward, making it appear to be an independent and isolated target for him, and finally he takes the bait. He sends his cataphracts in, and right behind those long shields of course is the woodland. Now I maneuver those cavalry over on my far left to make an encircling movement. His cataphracts come within range of my javelins, just as I had hoped. That forward unit is taking some pretty nasty casualties. As you can see, it's almost destroyed already, beneath the weight of 6 units of scutarii, releasing their javelins at once. You can see that my opponent is wary of the position. He stopped his cavalry, he's patiently outlasted my javelins, and he sends them swinging around to face my horsemen on the hill, while sending his infantry in, supported by some more cataphracts, into the centre. Fortunately, he charges directly into my strongest unit, the bull warriors. Along with Spartans, they're the only unit in the whole game that have the full complement of 80 men on large unit size per unit, and yet have 2 hit points per man. Those cataphracts, facing the combat penalties and bonuses that I described previously, are rout immediately. Also, they're facing the concerned by number of enemy effect, because they were alone and yet facing an entire army. They rout pretty swiftly. There's the enemy's general. He's surrounded by my cavalry, which I've used to complete an encircling movement inside the woods. Now that the iron core of my opponent's army has been shattered, I have only the silver shield pikemen remaining, and my opponent doesn't apparently know how to deploy them properly. He sent them in by right-clicking them all at once on one of my infantry units as a target, and so they have all simply formed into one long shuffling line. And instead of advancing them out of phalanx formation, running them in and then tapping the F key to lower their spears at the last second, he's walking in, giving me time to run my barbarian infantry well out of reach, and then just from one side and to the other in order to begin an encircling and outflanking maneuver. 2 of my opponent's cataphract units regrouped. He sends them back into the battle immediately and simply repeats exactly the same mistake before. Perhaps he was hoping that by using his cataphracts there he could fix me in place in the woods so that his phalanx spears would be able to do their work. But I destroy them far too quickly and pull out again. I now begin my encircling attack. I destroyed them so quickly, I think, because they had already routed and regrouped, and when that happens, a unit's morale is much more frail. Now, each and every one of these barbarian infantry is gaining a combat bonus for fighting in the woods. These long shield cavalry I'm charging in from the other side. By themselves, they'd be of no use at all against pikemen. However, they bulk up my numbers here, and by sheer overwhelming force of numbers, the morale of my enemy is worn down as they become concerned by number of enemy. As I complete the encirclement, they suffer a morale hit also for concern over exposure of flanks. Finally, it becomes too much for them and the rout commences. Now, what should my opponent have done? Well, ideally he would have taken some archers in the first place, so as to be able to force me to come out from the woods and attack him. But failing that, he should have deployed his pikemen in one long thin line, against an advance of which barbarian infantry would have had no recourse other than to divide and try to attempt outflanking maneuvers, which would have made them isolated and more vulnerable to strikes from his cavalry. And if I had responded with my cavalry, he could have had his cataphracts pull out their maces and my horsemen would have been destroyed.